Welcome to the Higher Ed Athletics Podcast. Today I'm joined by Fred Glass, former Vice President and Athletic Director at IU. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, the reason we're here talking is mostly about your new book, Making Your Own Luck from a Skid Row Bar to Rebuilding Indiana University Athletics. Yeah, I kind of want to talk first, though, about one thing you and I had in common, I feel like, was our admiration for the late Herman B. Wells, the longtime IU president. He was in office from 1938 to 1962. He was from a very small town in Indiana that was only about 5 miles from my small town, Indiana. And so I drive through that town every once in a while, Jamestown, and think it's cool that the IU president was from there. You know, his book, Being Lucky, it sits on my desk right over here. And with the naming of the book, and you talk about the book inside yours, did the title derive at all from Herman B. Wells, or any inspiration you may have pulled from Herman?
No on the title, but yes on the inspiration from Wells. I unfortunately didn't get to know him, but I've read everything I can about him, including Being Lucky, and I think the Capshaw biography, which is really, really good too. And frankly, I shamelessly stole from him in trying to lead IU athletics, and I always had a gigantic picture of him in my office to really draw inspiration, and so he's one of my heroes, and I feel like I tried to emulate him as much as I could. Of course, falling short, but when you've got a role model like that, it's good to follow him if you don't quite get there.
Yeah, one thing in the book that I always stuck with me was how he went out to recruit professors, and it just made me think, like, he had to take train to go try and recruit professors to come at IU as he was building up the institution. But it's kind of reminded me of if an AD had to still go do that for coaches. I mean, you got to take private flights and everything. So it's kind of a modern day version of Herman B. Wells' effort to recruit faculty. So I knew that book. I knew Herman. You used to give speeches or mention him in your speeches, and I read that book before I started working at IU. For those that aren't aware, when I had you on the podcast, it was actually about 3 weeks before I interviewed at IU, and it just happened. Athletic director, you put the podcast out, I think like a month into my job. So it was really awkward that everyone knew I was doing a podcast. They're still cool with it, but it's kind of funny that all of a sudden I don't have control when the episode of the current athletic director of my institution comes out. But it was a fun conversation. So I knew from back then that you were a big Herman B. Wells fan. And so I'm going to try and keep some of the conversations that we had in the first episode that people can go back and listen to will be different in this one, because I want to keep the focus on the book, much of which is in the book. But, what I want to kind of talk about kind of leading off is in the beginning of the book, it is would you explain it, part autobiography, part advice? That's how I took from it. But what I'm curious about, you were very authentic about your upbringing with your parents in that Skid Row bar. And I thought that it really resonated with me. My childhood, I was the son of a high school dropout truck driver, had his own battles with painkillers after a major back surgery. And then I had a mom who worked, nonstop and had me and 3 brothers at home to take care of. And so I picked up on a lot of that. And then in college, I was a janitor at a hospital for several years. And you can imagine the people I work with, some of them face their own life challenges. They're in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And you can get a lot of advice from them. You can learn a lot from them when you're younger. So it made me think, as I read through that part of the book, what do you think you learned or were shaped from by your parents and, especially your dad, but then also being around those people that came into the bar at your upbringing, like what you kind of learned throughout the rest of your life from that part of your life?
Well, thanks for that, Travis. And I'm glad you had that reaction to it. I did try to be authentic and unvarnished because I wanted to be that kind of book. And if my ultimate call to action here is to say, hey, even a knucklehead like me can have an opportunity to do some pretty cool things, I couldn't pull my punches on what a knucklehead I was. So I think I laid that out in fairly unvarnished fashion, and I'm glad you received it that way. I'll also tell you that one of the surprises from the book is people, maybe like you, being encouraged to talk about some of the things that went on in your childhood. I've had lots of people come up to me at events and say, my mom was an alcoholic. I never really talked about it. I had anxiety attacks. I never really talked about it. And the book helped give them permission to revisit that, maybe share that with their loved ones. That's a real added bonus. For me, I grew up in the back of Skid Row bar. I hated it, but I was there all the time. I was an only child, so I was part of a parent family. My parents were always at the bar. I was always with my parents, and I wanted to be doing stuff with my friends and be more normal. I felt very not normal being in the back of that bar. But in retrospect, it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I think it helped me gain empathy with people. That there were these people that most would look at as vagrants or winos or drunks or whatever, and I got to know them as individuals, as people, and that was a huge gift. And my father, who had his challenges, as you mentioned, he was an alcoholic and all that, but he had some real positive attributes, and he had his own demons that I did something to help himself, and it adversely impacted me, and I didn't like it. But I saw him in the environment at Skid Row bar, basically, living the gospel, and he certainly wasn't a religious man, but through how he treated that clientele, he modeled for me, without me really understanding that, kind of that care for other people and care for the whole person and all that. So one of the things I try to observe in the book is so much of my upbringing and preparation, if you will, there's no credit to. I didn't earn or do any of it. In fact, I resented a lot of it. On the negative side, the Skid Row bar, my dad's alcoholism. On the more positive side, my parents' commitment to public service and social justice, and racial equality. Even being sent to a Jesuit prep school, that's not something I really wanted, and I was the beneficiary of that. I should emphasize too that it's not a story about a kid pulled up from the gutter. I almost didn't name it "Make Your Own Luck" because I didn't want it to sound presumptuous, like all you have to do is this, because I've had a lot of advantages. My parents were the first in their families to go to college, to go to college, and I grew up in a two-parent household. Even though my father's alcoholism complicated their marriage, it still modeled a strong marriage for me. I went to a Jesuit prep school. It's kind of a definition of privilege. And I wasn't discriminated against because who I loved or what color my skin was. So I had tons of advantages. But the point, I hope, of the book, I hope ultimately it's a book about empowerment, that an ordinary person like me, who made a lot of mistakes and did a lot of stupid stuff, can persevere to do some pretty cool things by recognizing and seizing opportunities, and what I always refer to as making your own luck. So I think you're right. It is an autobiography. It's a career arc of what I've done. I think there's some funny stories in there. I hope people enjoy that, especially how you people enjoy some behind the scenes stuff about what we did at the athletic department. But ultimately, I hope it's a book about empowerment and having people take charge of their careers and their lives.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was all of that for me. I kind of anticipated. I just stumbled on your book. I didn't even know you were writing one, and then I was happy to see that you were, and not surprised it was through IU Press. And so I was really excited when it came out. And for some reason, I don't know why, Amazon. I got the book at my doorstep before your release day, and so I guess it was my Amazon Prime. Maybe someone made a mistake. I read this thing in like 2 days, and I think it's just the time in my life that I needed to read a lot of the stuff that you wrote in that. And your book or your videos leading up to the book, I think was a great point that people can see those on YouTube, where you basically outline your wisdom that you experienced and that you wanted to share. I kind of want to shift a little bit to, you talked about empowerment. You don't want to see like you were making your own luck. I mean, that you acknowledge privileges there, but you've always come off to me as, and we didn't know each other well when we worked together. So I don't want people to think that, I was around you all the time. It's just I acknowledged or I admired a lot of the work that you'd done before I got to IU, which is why I had you on the podcast the first time. But you have always come off as a very confident person, and I don't say that as I say that actually as a compliment, because I think of myself as being confident in my abilities, my work ethic, and my preparation and decision making. I'm kind of curious, where did all that confidence over the years come from? Because you've worked in some big positions at very different areas throughout Indiana. Where's that confidence come from?
Well, I appreciate that because I take it as a compliment, Travis. But I will share with you that through a lot of my life, I was not a confident person. For whatever reasons, I felt like I didn't really belong. I felt like I was in the outer group. I certainly wasn't part of the in crowd. And I didn't have a lot of confidence about going into a room and talking to people or getting up in front of people and speaking. In fact, when I was in law school, the idea of getting up and reciting in class with professor drills you and all that, that freaked me out so much that I ended up quitting law school. And law school was my lifelong ambition, and so for me to even think about that shows how debilitating that was. Now, that's kind of funny now, right? Because I get up and speak in front of people all the time, and while I still get a little nervous about it, it's something that I earnestly enjoy and look forward to. And I share that, and I've shared that with a lot of kids in the department when I was there, because 18-year-old you doesn't have to be 25-year-old, and certainly doesn't have to be 62-year-old you. And people don't just automatically have these abilities to, have a great interview, give a great talk, whatever. And I hope that encourages people that might think, well, I just don't have it. Well, I didn't have it. And to a certain extent, I think in some realms I do now, at least in terms of, doing a lot of public presentations and appearing to be confident. And I guess being confident walking into a room or interacting with a colleague or whatever. But that was something that was very much learned, was not natural. It can be learned. And I'm flattered that you feel that way about me, because it's something I've had to work at my whole life.
Yeah, I remember in college, I was deathly afraid of getting up and giving a speech. And in everyone, a lot of people that listen to this know NACDA is the athletic administration thing. And I won the research award for the for N4A one year, or for NAC or N4A, one of the two, the compliance and academics one. And I didn't realize that the catch there was you also had to present at the national convention, and I had no idea. And so I did. And I wrote about, this is in grad school. I wrote about, I was working at Indiana State at the time. I was talking about Power 5 academic clustering in college football. And like someone recommended I talk about that. And because it was around the time the rules had been out for long enough. And so in the front row, when I get there, there's like 150 people there. And it's people from Texas, Michigan, Oklahoma in the front row. Afterwards, someone from the NCAA comes up, is like, hey, can we have your research on that? And I was just like, I was so worried about doing that. And then something just clicks. You're nervous, and then you do it. And if you're confident in how you prepare, I think over time, people, that's been a theme with across other people I've interviewed, where ADs, where they did not have that, and you had to work at it. And it comes into a lot of your preparation, and just sometimes not taking yourself too seriously too. I just had fun of it because, what's the worst that's going to happen? And now sometimes that's not the case depending on who you're talking to and what you're talking about. But yeah, I encourage people that I didn't have confidence as an undergrad, but now I can get up and speak really in front of anyone if I know what I'm talking about. So I think something, I don't know how I got that too, but it's definitely something that didn't happen overnight. So for those listening that maybe are not confident as well. So that's a great answer. Kind of switching gears a little bit, but still something that I picked up on the book. People that know your background will know that it covers a lot of political and Jesuit or religious comments, which obviously makes sense because it's part autobiography and then about your career as a university vice president and as an AD at the same time. Did you ever feel like you owed it to the job or in any other area you had work in that you had to downplay or disguise either your political or your Jesuit opinions or takes? And how did you kind of manage that? Because I think we see that a lot with faith and leadership and in the industry, and now right now with political division in certain positions, you got to be careful. How do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Travis. I think it's a different answer for those two topics. So the Jesuit piece first. Um, I don't think I ever. In fact, I'm confident that I never raised Jesuit concepts in terms of proselytizing or trying to convert people or talking about Jesus when there's a lot of other faith leaders people follow. And so I never thought it was appropriate, especially at a public research university, to be talking about religion per se. And, in a way, frankly, I think some people do. I don't think I did that. When I talk about the Jesuit piece, it was always in the context of their teaching as leaders. And some people may think that's a distinction you can't make. And I think that is not an unreasonable view, but I do think you can make that distinction. Now, a lot of them are things you might consider, religious in terms of loving your neighbor and all that, but it was always in the context of leadership. On the Jesuit side, no, I didn't try to hide my Jesuit light under a basket because, especially for a department that had been through so much trauma when I got there, I thought we needed to create a esprit de corps, cultural values of the organization. And I thought the Jesuits created a great roadmap for that. So I was pretty unabashed about talking about Ignatian teaching. On the political side, I really did try to turn that light off. I was clearly a partisan Democrat, active in the political arena, but I think uniformly recognized as somebody who's more of a bridge builder, not a bridge burner, not a bomb thrower, more of someone trying to bring people together. And that's what I believed in. And B, I think it stood me in good stead when I came in. Some of my biggest advocates for this job were active Republicans. Bill Steffen, a very active Republican who chaired the search committee, and Mike Sample, who was a vice president in the government affairs area, well-identified Republican. Steve Ferguson on the board of trustees. But I hope, like me, although on the other side of the aisle, all bridge building type people. Having said that, I didn't think politics and athletics mixed, and I didn't bring any of my political pictures into the office. I didn't talk about politics. So on that side, I really tried to just really not address that.
What I thought was interesting is you mentioned in the book that you ditched the suit and tie. And I thought that was kind of funny, and you because you were really trying to kind of start I don't know, like deflect, or maybe like this politician from Indianapolis, this lawyer, is coming into the athletic department. Can you kind of talk briefly about that? And that's nothing against suits, because we know current boss wears a suit every day. If people like to wear what they want to wear, but what was your kind of take on that? Why you thought that was important to the moment that you started at IU?
Yeah, Travis, if you put your finger on it, I think there was understandable questions about who's this guy coming to head the athletic department who didn't play, didn't coach, he's not from athletic administration, he's a lawyer and a politician from Indianapolis. I think there was very understandable skepticism among some staff and others about what I had to offer. And so one of the things I thought I would do was just lower the temperature on the lawyer from Indianapolis burner. And part of what I did that, the way I did that was I wore gear every day. I wore pullovers and polos and IU stuff every single day, unless I had some sort of big presentation or something like that. Now that's self-serving, right? I mean, that's awesome for me because I got to wear casual clothes, and so it certainly wasn't a sacrifice. But I thought it was important to set the tone that way. And interestingly, and you may not know this, but Scott Dolson, my successor, the current athletic director, wears a suit and tie every day for basically the same reason in reverse. His predecessor was super casual. Not saying that's wrong, but he wore, gym pants to work and very much dressed down. And so when Scott got his job, he said, I want to set a new tone, and my tone's going to be super professionalism. I'm going to wear a coat and tie. So I think Scott and I actually see eye to eye on that, of setting the image you want to set. It's just that our timing and sequence, was a little different. And those little things matter. I talk about a little bit in the book when I was interviewing coaches and staff before I actually took the job. Almost every person mentioned to me how off-putting it was that there was a locked door in the old assembly hall to keep people out of the athletic director's suite. That you couldn't just go in and see the athletic director or drop in or stick your head in. There was a locked door that you had to request entry, to get in. And that, through the interview process, I realized that had become a symbol for a detached leadership team, fairly or unfairly. So my first day, January 1st, 2009, I called up Chuck Crabb, who, as you know, in addition to being the voice of Hoosiers, is the head of facilities for the department, and said, hey, Chuck, that locked door, take it off the hinges. I want it out of here. And he's like, are you really? I go, yeah. So the first day, most people are on vacation on January 1st. Chuck takes that door off by the hinges, and everybody comes in. And I didn't hear it directly, but I heard secondhand that sent a powerful message, that the AD wasn't going to be behind a locked door. And so I think leaders need to look for tangible symbols of what they're trying to do. Of course, the substance is the most important. But things like what you wear, how you carry yourself, how your office is set up, what accessibility is like, all those things I think are important, including, painting on my door, the athletic director can always be interrupted for a student athlete. And you got to mean it, because they do. But I think that sends the right signal about who you're there to serve. So those little things can become big things.
Yeah, that message is still in the door. I was up there yesterday and saw it. So that is a theme that is lasting on. You talked about bridge building. A common theme I picked up again was really your ability to rally and then bring people together around these pretty big ideas. I mean, we've talked about in the last podcast, very much heavy in the book, whether it's in government, bringing a new NFL stadium and the Super Bowl to Indianapolis, or as the AD rebuilding and building new facilities here in what people would consider an athletic village. What was your approach to campaigning and fundraising to get people to kind of come together for these huge projects? And we'll get into the Mark Cuban thing next, but because I thought that was interesting in the book too. But how do you actually kind of bring people together to kind of come up with those? You can take that any direction. I know there's stories for each of them.
Sure. Well, some of it goes back to your guy, Herman Wells, and I am a student of Wells, and I do think he brought a lot of ideas that I used in working at athletics. And one of them that he said all the time was, dream no small dreams. They lack the passion to stir men's blood. I think Goethe said that originally, maybe 150 years before Wells, but Wells embraced that, and I embraced that. People are more willing and excited to rally around big ideas than little ideas. And if you have to back off a big idea a little bit for reality, that's okay, but it's hard to get people moving up the scale if you're not starting out talking about big things. So, we talked about big things, and I was shameless in pursuing people and asking them for money to help those things come true. Because, as you know, I don't want to get too much into the detail, but financially, Indiana's at a big disadvantage in the conference, basically because of our competitors in East Division football and how many people they put in the stadium and how much money they get. So if we're going to level the playing field, we have to kind of catch up by asking people for money through philanthropy. And most of the facilities we developed, I would say, were either whole or in significant part based on philanthropy, on money people gave us that doesn't have to go through our operational budget and all that. So a big component of that was, being very aggressive on fundraising, and thankfully Scott's a great fundraiser. We had a great fundraising team. Our supporters, our donors were very generous. But I had a window in which I wanted to get the facilities rebuilt, and we were impatient and aggressive on raising that money and getting that done.
Yeah, a lot of people put emphasis on obviously closing the Memorial Stadium and making that a bowl. I know that was really significant. And then also Simon Scott Assembly Hall, the modernizing of the renovations, after the roof started to literally fall, which you talk about in the book. Butler did an amazing thing too, where they redid Hinkle, so it can be done without losing that historic nature. I also think Wilkinson Hall is one of the nicest facilities that we've added, and for wrestling and volleyball. And so people should get on our website and check that out. If you're not local and can't go to a match, it's a great venue. So it's really kind of scattered all over our side. And I think one of the biggest things that I was thinking about was this convention center and Lucas Oil Stadium. Back to your days as the Capital Improvement Board, and that's vital to Indianapolis. So, this podcast is affiliated with IUPUI Sports Innovation Institute, and it's a very big tourism major program there at IUPUI. And I don't think that they realize the economic impact that Lucas Oil Stadium had, and maybe even arguably even more, is expanding the convention center. What was kind of the thought process there that you went into in the book, just briefly on that?
Here in Indianapolis?
Yeah, for what the impact has on the city and the future of the city of Indianapolis because of it. Obviously, we're hosting the college football playoff championship this year too, so it wouldn't happen if we didn't have Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Travis. Yeah, I'm really excited about the college football playoff being here. I mean, that's really sort of extraordinary. I'm on that host committee and really enjoy participating in that. I mean, we could talk on, and I'll avoid that. But Indianapolis has been the beneficiary of great leadership, Republican and Democrat, civic and governmental, for 40 years. And there is a special sauce here, I think, about the public sector, the private sector working together for the betterment of the city. Indianapolis has no natural attributes, right? We're not on a lake. We're not on an ocean. Our river's not even navigable. You can't bring ships on White River. There's no mountains. So Indianapolis was lucky enough just to make up, let's be an event city. Let's be the amateur sports capital of the world. Let's create a downtown that's connected with its event venues, sports venues, restaurants, bars, lodging. That makes it one of the premier event cities in the country, even though we're not blessed with great weather year round. So we're competing with Orlando, Vegas, Miami, Phoenix, places that do have a lot of natural attributes, and we're able to compete because of what we did. The facilities we built. And when Mark Peterson was mayor, I worked for him. We felt strongly that stewardship role of, okay, what's this generation going to do? What are we going to do to add to the pie? Because like a lot of other things, if you're not growing, then you're getting left behind. And we were already hearing from major conventions that we're not going to stay in Indianapolis. You guys don't back in stay on convention center. We're hearing from the Colts that unless the economics of the deal changed, and our view was the stadium was going to have to drive that, then they might leave. And I think probably would have left. So we really needed to create $1 billion project, a big part of which was expansion of the convention center, which kind of gets left behind because it's kind of boring to those people compared to Lucas Oil Stadium. But I think those both were of equal importance. And we're able to have a regular rotation at NCAA floors, keep the Colts, expand the convention business, retain those conventions. And it's not only an economic driver for the city, it helps our quality of life. All these restaurants and cool places to go downtown are there primarily because of the visitors we have from conventions. Now, over time, hopefully, we'll get more downtown residents and it'll be more homegrown. But I have my choice of a bunch of really fun places to go eat because of our convention business. So those were the stakes there, and it was instructive to go to IU because people are always the most important thing. Wells said it's faculty more than laboratories, classrooms, whatever, that make you famous. You alluded to that, Travis. That's the same with athletics. It's coaches that make you famous. But facilities matter, man. And some people say, oh, they shouldn't matter. A kid should want to come to Indiana. Well, why should a kid want to come to Indiana in any sport if we don't look like we're investing in it? You know? So I think that's a deep criticism to make. I think it's really unfair. And I think part of what was important during my tenure in Indiana was to invest in facilities. So I don't think we ever lost a kid because our facilities weren't up to par. I think we did before when baseball and softball were in the school fields. Volleyball and wrestling were literally playing in a high school gym, and the football stadium was still 2 concrete grandstands facing each other. So I do think rebuilding that physical foundation was important, and I think it's positioned us, to continue to have improved success, on the court, the field, the pool, all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say we're not lacking any resources as far as the competition or the practice spaces. So the team did a great job led by you there. Now I want to end it really with 2 more questions that are probably more related to the government and the IU side of things shared. I mentioned Mark Cuban. I thought I could have taken this another direction to hear about your Super Bowl bid. I think people need to read that because it was really, if people listen to this have to go and make like a big bid or a big request, I think the Super Bowl part of that book is really critical. But they can also pick up on something that you did with Mark Cuban. And in the book, you talk about the process of pitching Mark, who everyone knows him from Shark Tank, but he's also an IU grad and he loves IU. And he wanted to try and figure out ways he would donate to IU athletics. Can you kind of share that story, what ultimately became the very timely, I would say, and I think you mentioned this in the book, an important Mark Cuban Center for Sports Media and Technology. So maybe what you originally went for to talk to him about, and his reaction didn't surprise me because I watched every episode of Shark Tank. But maybe just kind of share them with that story, and then we'll end it up with one more question.
Yeah, so you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that if you're the athletic director in Indiana, you should go ask Mark Cuban for money, right? This guy's a billionaire. He loves IU sports. And he and I were actually classmates, class of '81, although I didn't know him. I did spend a considerable amount of time in his bar that he bought before he turned 21, which I thought was awesome. But so I went to see him with AT, and he and AT had formed a relationship because I wanted to get a big gift from him to redo Summit Hall. He was my first partner to do that. As you alluded to, he basically said, I don't get money for buildings. It builds in too much cost. It impacts tuition. I'm like, no, it doesn't. We're athletics. We don't get any money from tuition. It can't push up tuition. I don't care. I don't want to do that. So basically I said, well, what would you do? And he goes, I would support something that would help develop kids I want to hire someday. So I left that meeting not discouraged because he had said no, but excited that I figured out what made him excited. And I had in the back of my mind that I really wanted to try to pivot more toward student-centered, student-developed social media videos, because even then we were just moving away from manila envelopes of recruiting information and to videos. And our staff wasn't well positioned because they were all older people like me. That wasn't what they did. My kids could do something on their phone with videos that it was cooler than our in-house staff could do it. And they were very talented people. So my idea was, let's get with the kids on campus. want to do this stuff for a living and are good at it and unleash their creativity and develop a portfolio and do cool stuff. And we get all this content, which would be cool. So we worked on that a little bit and decided to pitch Mark on that. Basically said, hey, we want your money to buy technology. You know, well, we're gonna build out a room and assemble. It won't be anything new, although we want to create a green screen room, acoustic booth for sound, which we did. But the real play was to develop technology. So you made me think about this, Travis. The staff was like, oh, he's a tech guy. We got to do something really cool. We'll have multiple laptops. We'll have all this stuff, or we'll have this dog and pony show. And I did a little research on him, and he was on a show with Colin Cowherd, and Colin said, what do you really get turned off by on Shark Tank? He said, I hate the backstory. I don't want to hear about how they cut fabric on a ping pong table. You know, I don't want to hear that. I just want their idea. So I'm like, man, I'm just gonna hit them with my idea. I literally had a 3x5 card with 5 points on it. Flew down there with AT. Got to my third point. He held up his hand as if to tell me to be quiet, which I did. And then he said, I could get behind that. I'll give you $5 million to start, which was ironically exactly what I was going to ask. So I got the hell out of there because I learned a long time ago, once you get the business, get out of the room before they change their mind. And then that became ultimately the Cuban Center with investments they made in the 360 technology, both in Memorial Stadium and Assembly Hall. When I left, we were still the only school that had that in both their major venues, virtual reality stuff that we were using to train students, student athletes. And it became like this good housekeeping seal of approval that all these tech guys with a better mousetrap wanted to trot it out at Indiana, because the Cuban name is gold in all the areas we want: sports, technology, media. Is there a better name than Mark Cuban in those three areas together? You know, I think not. In fact, I had to beg him to put his name on the thing because he didn't want to, because he thought it was too self-aggrandizing. I said, no, man, that'd be another gift for us. So over beers in the Conrad Hotel in Indianapolis, and the Mavs were to play the Pacers, you know, I talked him into putting his name on the facility. So I tell that story a lot to donors because people understand sometimes you got to be patient. You got to listen to your donors. You got to do what they want to do, not necessarily what you want to do. See how that fits into the overall program. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Mark Cuban Center has been a differentiating and transformational part of Indiana University athletics.
Yeah, I think it's just a great story that a lot of people. I mean, this is a podcast where I interview ADs and college presidents, so the people listening are likely the ones that want to be ADs or college presidents. And so I think that, you know, you find your big donor and know the ask, know the parameters. I think what's more important is knowing what they don't want to do, which you found that out early, and then not talk too much. So it sounds like you did a good job with that. And you know, I kind of want to end it, and not as flashy as, you know, talking about donations. But, you know, you talked about one of the decisions to come to IU and be the AD was you'd always been kind of a staffer as far as, you know, in government, politics, kind of helping other people run things, and you wanted a chance to run things. But I want to kind of go back to when people that do want to help others run things, like most of your career was. I had the pleasure of speaking to Karen Adams for an assignment, one of my doc classes for about 45 minutes. And, you know, it was a busy time, obviously, because it's during President McRobbie's transition. She was the chief of staff to President McRobbie and is now the President Witten's chief of staff. And I'm now reading The Gatekeepers, how the White House chief of staffs define every presidency, which you may have read. But based on your experiences, what makes someone either a good, great, or bad chief of staff in your experiences in whatever, whether it's politics or anything? I would think most of it's the same principles, because it's becoming a norm in college athletics to actually see chief of staffs instead of a deputy, someone that can handle that. But I've always been intrigued by that position, whether in higher education or athletics.
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of characteristics that are very useful to that, you know. But to answer your question, I think the most important element is your willingness and really enthusiasm to subvert your own ego for that of your principal. You just don't matter. I think the chief of staffs and the agency heads and this person, that person, what hurts them is they start to think they matter as much or more than their principal, and they have an independent persona, and they think they matter, and I think you should feel that you don't matter, that all power, if you will, or influence or responsibility is there not because of you, but because of your principal, because of your governor or your president or your AD or your agency head or whatever. And I think that you promote your organization by promoting your principal. That sounds maybe fairly pedestrian, but I think that single focus on your principal is the most important thing. And then, of course, you keep your own rudder in terms of values and all that. If your principal ever asks you to do something you don't think is right, you don't blindly follow that. I'm not talking about hero worship. I'm talking about if you're working with somebody you believe in, you need to, you jump on the hand grenades, you deliver bad news, you give all them credit and good news. And I think that's the most important element of being a good staff person.
Well, Fred, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I know you've been keeping busy with your, I don't know if we call it retirement, I guess just the next chapter. And I really think people need to go get the book. I read it in 2 days. A lot of highlights in here. I think it just caught me at a time in my life where I'm kind of an IU lifer too. I was IU undergrad and a degree from IU Bloomington, and now I'm a doc student here. But I also just love Indianapolis and I love Bloomington. So it's the two of the same places where if you're listening to this nationally, you don't know much about IU, you might not be as interested. But I think if anyone that works in college athletics administration is going to learn from this, whether you're in Indy or not. So just thanks for writing it. I know it was something that that you had said that I think your daughter got you a book that kind of got you thinking about this stuff, and your mom always wanted you to write a book or something like that. So I can any closing thoughts on that, or just for people that are thinking about picking up the book?
No, Travis, I really appreciate you having me on. And I think boiled down to it, one of the things I learned at IU from the kids was all the magic happens outside your comfort zone. And so it's great to be prepared and read stuff and go to, professional development seminars and all that. But there comes a time when you have to take jobs you're not sure you're ready for, or take on projects you're not sure you can do, or make a presentation to your trade association in front of a bunch of peers that makes you nervous. But that's where the magic happens. So I just encourage the people that are, listening to this to look for opportunities, to step outside their comfort zone, seize those opportunities, even if they're not convenient times, even if you don't know if you've got the chops for it, because those are the things that are going to be the most rewarding for you.
That's the route I take every time Maddie has another project for me to do. So I've learned from that was one that stuck out is if someone else thinks you can do it, you can find a way to get it done. So that's another good bit of wisdom from the book. So Fred, thanks for being on the Higher Ed Athletics podcast again for the second time.
I really appreciate the opportunity, Travis. Always enjoy talking.